right off the bat, we're gonna come out with the guns firing. Yeah.
So the point of mining, the point of proof of work, isn't necessarily security. Miners are sheep and you are shepherds.
How dare you? How dare you?
We were attacked by a what appears to be a rented GPU farm.
You don't need to be popular. People who change the world aren't popular.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the VoskCoin YouTube channel. I have two legends here with me today, OhGodAGirl Kristy and Reuben Yap. There's a Yap. Introduce yourselves and tell us all about you.
Hi, I'm Kristy, formerly of Genesis Mining and Chorus Scientific, most known for ethlargement as well as ETH PoW. Do a lot of stuff in the mining space, currently working on layer 1 protocols and zero knowledge proofs. And I am known as the hardware person, I guess, in the industry.
Right. I'm Reuben. I am part of the core team of FIRO. We are a privacy-centric cryptocurrency and, a very long-time supporter of GPU mining. Now I'm not so sure, so here's where we are to discuss this, right? Right off the bat, we're gonna come out with the guns firing. Yeah.
Well, let's jump into it. So, Reuben, how about you hit the floor running? What do you think about GPU mining? You've been, operating a key member of a GPU mineable project for years. You even had the algorithm change that was built really around GPU mining. Just how has it been? How has it changed? And where do you see it going?
Philosophically and theoretically, I still like the idea of GPU mining, right? Like the idea of, commodity, accessible hardware to mine. And I guess it's something a bit special, like, hey, I'm using my gaming PC, I'm using something to generate internet magic money. I think all of us, when we got into mining, there was that magic about just turning on your existing PC or whatnot and start mining and getting, some cryptocurrency and being part of this, right? And I guess, now we are seeing this shift towards proof of stake mechanisms or I think mining isn't really sexy anymore. Everyone's like, oh, mining, it's not scalable. I mean, Kristy has definitely opinions on that, and it's bad for the environment, and there's this growing sentiment saying that, why are we doing proof of work mining? And I personally feel that it's good to have different layers of security and also like, community members of a project. For example, like especially as a privacy cryptocurrency, we don't want to have just one group of people dominating both the security and the governance, right? And now if everyone's going to proof of stake, coin holders are basically one of the biggest, especially those who implement on-chain governance with coin voting, which is a horrible idea, but it's just moving to this place where coin holders are the governance, the security, and everything, right? While at least with miners, even if you have a hybrid system like FIRO is, you have like several different groups of people that you have to satisfy, and each of them have different goals. So I guess it's harder to achieve some sort of governance capture there. So I guess there's pros and cons, and I do think people kind of underestimate the centralization risk of proof of stake. They don't think about what happens when everyone's like being hosted in these large centralized data centers, right? And mining's kind of above that, especially if it's commodity hardware mining. But yeah, recently we've been questioning this. Not saying that first of all, I'm still not against GPU mining. I still think they have a role to play, especially in the privacy coin. But I'm just wondering, like, whether they do deserve like the premier position, and maybe they should be deprioritized a little to kind of reflect their involvement and contribution to the project. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much on that. We can lots of time, but that's my thoughts in a nutshell. Yeah.
It just reminds me a lot of the Ethereum core devs 3 years ago and a lot of their comments. So the point of mining, the point of proof of work isn't necessarily security, even though it serves that function. It's to bootstrap the network, and it's to issue new coins. That is the thing it does really well, because it is permissionless, and anyone with an existing, you know, in an ideal world, anyone with an existing desktop can just come in, download the client, start contributing to the network, and get paid accordingly. That is really critical for bootstrapping brand new networks. And for that, proof of work is unparalleled, and it always will be. It's superior for that. The issue with proof of stake is your only way to bootstrap is to make a user choose between their existing cryptocurrency holdings and come into your new token through a DEX, or to part with their fiat and come in through a centralized exchange. And for people that are brand new to crypto and are a little intimidated or scared by it, they are not going to sell their fiat. And more importantly, someone who is currently struggling to make ends meet also isn't going to be able to convert their fiat into crypto at an exchange. And so proof of stake really caps the amount of new users you can get into the ecosystem. Now, the choice of hardware, whether it's CPU or GPU, doesn't matter at the end of the day, because it's both accomplishing the same thing. It's, bootstrapping the network. I'd say that it depends on the ecosystem, whether these, individuals, whether miners are contributing back to the project. I look at the early days of Ethereum, where most of the grants around research and development and a lot of community funding actually came from mining pools. Not individual miners themselves, I will warn on that, but mining pools, right? They put back into Ethereum. Now, the larger mining farms did a lot around marketing and publicity. They went out, they grew the asset in their own way. We've had public companies build their entire business model on Ethereum. So that includes Hut 8 over in Canada, as well as Hive Blockchain over in Canada. And they, talk about the merits and the value of Ethereum and why they love it. And it's part of their balance sheet and part of their investor meetings. All of that has helped grow the asset, and it's helped grow its adoption. And the same for Monero's mining community. The Monero mining community, is on CPUs, but most of that community is incredibly resilient. They're quick to move, quick to decentralize their hash rate. They're coordinated. And then, Ravencoin is another great example of a community that's very tight-knit, and most of the funding for new initiatives like wallets or alternative projects comes from the miners themselves. So I think FIRO's problem right now isn't necessarily miners, and it's not necessarily proof of work or proof of stake. It's an apathetic community. I mean, Ethereum had this issue early on. They were overpaying miners drastically. And that's why the difficulty bomb came in, and that's why issuance was decreased. Because when miners are overpaid too much, they just get incredibly apathetic. They're not spending a lot of their they're spending a lot of their coins. They're not really caring too much about the ecosystem. When they're getting paid just enough to cover their operations, the psychology starts to change. Miners actually start doing due diligence into the asset. Do they want to keep this on their balance sheet? They try and get involved in other ways. We see this same psychology in video games as well around scarce assets. So, to finish up, I think it's very much to do with the community right now, and that's the issue. And I don't see an easy way to fix that.
How do you assess whether you're overpaying or what's the sweet spot in because obviously a lot of miners, especially, they're saying when I'm mining FIRO, technically I'm not making that much money because I could be mining Ethereum, right? So why, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the kind of people you don't want in your community. someone that's a true believer in your project and your coin, they would go and mine Ethereum and then they would convert it into FIRO. I watched the Raven coin miners do that for years with Ethereum. You know, they fundamentally believed in the project. So in order to determine if you're overpaying for security, the unfortunate answer is it depends, of course, on the protocol. But normally you would look at a company's operations and what percent of their profits are going into their OPEX and their CAPEX, and then what's left over. So out of all the revenue you've made, what's going into, you know, paying for your electricity, what's going into paying for your infrastructure, your hardware, all of those costs, and then what's going in, what's your profit. Bitcoin gives us a really great understanding of what's, you know, the right amount, which is around 60% should go to OPEX and CAPEX, and the rest remains profit. And a payback period of 9 months is seen as kind of reasonable. FIRO is consistently in the top 2 for profitability. I mean, I look at what to mine quite often. It's up there. So I'm not sure why miners are saying that it is unprofitable or complaining. It's right below Ethereum, and in some days it's even, you know, being more profitable than Ethereum to mine.
A few things you've said, Kristy, especially, have really resonated with me in regards to like the benefit of mining and proof of work. For example, you talked about new users are not going to spend their fiat to get into a coin, like especially as their first coin. And so there's a lot, I can see like the counter argument would be like, what are you talking about? The most likely way is someone's going to get on Coinbase and turn their dollars into some Bitcoin or something like that. Like, I mean, that's like kind of true. But if you really like dive in heavily, or you're very skeptical of cryptocurrency, I think that's where your point really rings true. And for me personally, about 5 years ago, a little bit more than 5 years ago, it's crazy. It's already been 5 years. And that's what people will say after they get into cryptocurrency tomorrow. They'll be like, this is crazy. I can't believe it's 2030. You know? But it was Ethereum and the fact that I could GPU mine it that I got into cryptocurrency. I didn't understand it fully. I was scared. I was skeptical. And it wasn't even just being mineable, it was also the fact that it was mineable with multi-purpose hardware. I built out GPU mining rigs that I knew if this Ethereum thing went to zero, because it's a digital currency, who knows, right? Then well, at least I still have graphics cards, right? Those have a purpose. Worst case scenario, VoskCoin's not a crypto YouTube channel. It's a used gaming PC reseller, right? You know, I'm like oldegg.com. You know, I'm turning all my GPU rigs into, you know, little gaming PCs, and I'm just trying to break even because I suck at, you know, investing in cryptocurrencies, I guess. You know, that was my backup plan. And that like gave me the confidence to get into crypto. And I think so many people don't realize that, I shouldn't say so many people, but like projects overlook the value of a miner is not just a miner. A miner will have your wallet. A miner will trade coins. A miner can do many other functions. By nature of mining, you do all these other things with cryptocurrency. I think that to one degree that mining has become almost too easy in a way. You can just mine to a crypto exchange and nobody seems to care about that anymore. I do it myself sometimes. I've like become part of the problem in a way. And but you know, a few years ago, you have to spin up a full node. You know, welcome, and we had GUIs, right? You know, no one's even doing anything with command line interface. You know, we have all this advanced code and stuff, right? You know, it's so daunting when you're a noob. Even syncing a full node, people don't know what that patience is like. You know, I connect to the daemon. I'm like, all right, I'll check in 2 days. You know, and you got to fire your wallet up before you even send out any coins. We've like already progressed to like the era of like instant gratification within cryptocurrency with you know, just light wallets. You know, you're not running your own nodes and everything like that. But to kind of take a step further, you know, I don't want to, you know, drone on too long or whatever, but a big point for me and kind of how I've seen things change and you know, in the sector, but also even personally over the years is I'm a passionate guy, basically. And so, you know, I get into cryptocurrency and I'm looking for like what I like, you know, I'm kind of getting into Ethereum. I look at some other cryptocurrencies. You have that like allure of like, I want to find the next Ethereum. I want to find the next Bitcoin. And so I spent I don't want to name drop anything specifically. It's not really the point. It's more of, I've seen this happen with, you know, 17 different projects basically. You rally behind a project as a miner, and then you become all those other things in their ecosystem, like a trader. Maybe you join their Reddit, you know, you're part of their community. Maybe you write an article because you do think it's really cool. Or maybe you start recording some of the stuff you're doing with mining or even outside of mining, and you put it on YouTube. Before you know it, here's a mining guide on how to mine, say, Ethereum. But then also here's a wallet guide for what to do with your mined coins / just your Ethereum coins, period. And so you start there is this big opportunity to contribute. Not everyone does that, but many do. And then those people, especially like when you become a higher level of a contributor and not just what can be kind of viewed as like a leech in the ecosystem of you're just mining these coins and dumping them. And then that project basically just, you know, makes changes to diminish your rewards from mining. You see that miners are overpaid. We don't need miners. Miners are worthless. All miners do is dump. You know, it's very offensive. It's very upsetting. It's like, wow, like, you know, I was real passionate. I thought this was so cool, but like I'm a loser, you know? I'm on like the outs. Like I'm like the bottom of the ecosystem because I'm a miner. Whereas on the flip side, like that's the biggest grassroots marketing approach like possible. How cool is that anyone in the world who has, say, like a gaming PC could turn it on and get some coins and kind of participate in this ecosystem. That's the big line of friction for ASIC mining. And there's the pros and cons of this hardware. And you know, that's a very deep discussion, but nobody has a Bitcoin miner sitting in their basement. You know, you may have a gaming PC or just a PC that has any decent level of hardware. But I've just kind of watched miners get crapped on year over year over year, and it's pissed me off. I dump more coins than ever before, and I hate saying that. You know, but a lot of these projects don't support like you just don't feel supported. And so if this project doesn't support me, it's you start to get selfish. Why would I support them? And I think the big issue, because I don't want to see mining go away for 100 reasons, but where is the balance of projects supporting the miners, but like you said, like not overpaying them? You had an interesting point, like on, say, scarcity, right? And maybe even a step further of like fully defining like what is a miner's role in your ecosystem? Is it security? Is it just, you know, distributing and minting coins and having like a fair distribution model where more people can participate? You know, and it's very deep. It's a very deep and complex problem. And you go project to project, like Bitcoin's proof of work debacle versus Ethereum versus FIRO are all different.
You said something as well about miners, people getting into crypto through exchanges. One of the things that worries me right now is how centralized we've become in the US. And it's all well and good because we have great exchange infrastructure here in the US, right? Mining allows people in China and Korea and, you know, in APAC regions to get exposure to cryptocurrency where exchange infrastructure isn't built out. There are plenty of territories, plenty of countries, and plenty of states that exchanges still don't serve. And so you are excluding that entire population from your project when you jump into proof of stake. Mining gives those countries exposure. And it just makes me really sad how people are forgotten about that.
You know, like Voss was talking about, it's almost like last time when we got into mining, getting into mining was almost like a user education process into your ecosystem. And you know, as you say, maybe now it's too easy. Everyone's just like mining to an exchange directly, you know. Now, you know, to be fair, you know, of course, you know, Voss is talking about like, you know, do projects support GPU miners? And honestly, I mean, in my personal point of view, you know, FIRO has for 6 years, right? Yeah, it's about more we've been around since 2016. And, you know, GPU mining has been one of our so-called pillars, right? We spend, maybe to me it's a bit of like, in retrospect, a bit of a waste of our time when we were trying to develop MTP, hit all sorts of snags, and went into like this whole academic ding dong, and suddenly our algorithm wasn't great, and we spent so much resources on that when we could have been focusing on privacy. And even when we had the chance to switch to a more efficient algorithm, we chose again. We said yes, we are committing to GPU miners still. This is why we picked FIRO PoW. I work with Kristy, and which is a FIRO PoW is a prop PoW variant, right? And we were like, look, we want to keep GPU mining, but just recently, like, I was like thinking to myself, and I wasn't alone, right? Many people were like saying, okay, what have the miners actually contributed to the project? And it's not like we supported them then dropped them. We have been really, really supporting them for a long time, and our technology stack, our development has been focused in that direction. And yet 80+% of the hash rate is on 2 miners, right? And we have tried many ways to try to decentralize that hash rate. We've been calling people to decentralize the hash rate. We've been asking, we've been even giving incentives to certain pools, like, hey, here's 100 FIRO to pump up your rewards for a bit, so that you can offer a lower, a higher payout, right? That didn't work, or it worked for like a very short while, and then once the incentives dried up, they went back to 2 miners again, right? And we asked 2 miners said no, they chose us because we're the best pool, so we don't see why we should decrease our fee, increase our fees to decentralize the hash rate. And we have helped you guys in the past, which is true. When we were having security issues, working with these pools was quite a smooth process, but it's not great.
Well, so one question regarding 2 miners: have they done anything to contribute to your ecosystem? I know you said you worked with them when you had a security issue, but like outside of that, like do they have any other level of contribution to your ecosystem? Like Kristy said earlier, like in the beginning, Ethereum mining pools were running grants and related to the ETH ecosystem. Does 2 miners take any initiative like that?
I'm not significantly. I think they contribute like $5 or $10 to our fund every month. I'm not sure even if that's going on. They probably wrote like one or two articles about us, which is appreciated. But I feel like if I had to say which was the pool that supported us the most, it has been Minpon. Minpon's like a small pool, and he was developing that time when he was developing MTP. He developed the whole like MTP custom stratum himself, released that open source, and that was like significant development work, and that's something I appreciated. And every time we said like we needed some sort of reference pool infrastructure, Minpon was always there to help us, and we were like really thankful for that. But the other pools, I mean, they have definitely helped us during the when we were experiencing like security issues and stuff like that. We could like roll out security updates to them really quickly, and they were very helpful on that. But yeah, in terms of contribution, otherwise no. So that's what 2 miners arguments like, because you are super centralized, so I mean we are super centralized, so that means like if there are any security issues, you just have to come to us and you're good, right? And that's a point, but it's also not the point. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
it's definitely not the dream. You weren't like setting out on this proof of work journey like, man, I can't wait until one mining pool has almost all our hash rate. That's not the goal.
But yeah, I mean, like miners, even our mining channel, like I even asked like, hey, could you guys contribute and tell me what your hash rates are on different hardware with FIRO PoW, right? Because yes, it's prop PoW variant, it should be more or less the same, but we haven't seen this helpful community. Unlike the masternodes, they have been much more supportive and engaged with the project, right? And when we started the poll, DJ Minds interviewed me and stuff like that, and I was like, sharing our thoughts. Because one thing that really, really kind of shook me was, when we were 51% attacked, we didn't see any sort of help from miners or any sort of like attempt to try to secure the network. We didn't, when we asked for donations, it was not miners that were giving to us. It was the masternode holders that were giving to us. When we asked for feedback, any sort of governance, the miners were also not engaged. Maybe that's the project's fault, but on the other hand, the masternode holders were very incentivized to give their views. Right or wrong, they were vocal and really wanting to get involved in the project, right? And I said, like, look, miners, please, if you can hear me, for the very one thing that you could do the show, at least you care about, because everyone's like saying, oh, we provide you security of the network, we do all these wonderful things. I'm like, well, decentralize your hash rate. It costs you nothing. These other pools are getting enough blocks per day so that it's not like very irregular payouts. There's no reason why you can't just shift your hash rate. And a couple did, but I was looking at the trend, it was like within the margin of error, maybe 2% change. It wasn't anything that was noticeable. And all these miners saying, oh, we're mining Ethereum right now, but after Ethereum goes proof of stake, we'll mine you then. Therefore, I want to vote, or I'll screw you. Now I'm not going to mine FIRO because you guys not supporting miners. Like, you guys aren't even part of our community yet if you aren't mining. I mean, if you don't really hold FIRO, if you don't really mine, and that actually made a lot of FIRO holders really upset. They were like, why are you giving the voice and an equal vote to miners who aren't part of your ecosystem or aren't a big part of the ecosystem? Why don't you just give it to the coin holders, which I said was totally wrong? But it showed that I really wanted the miners' feedback. Why would I go publicly on a mining channel, even DJ Mines, yourself, and say, miners, please, do something, right? And it's not that we want to play them out. It's just that it's more of like a last call for help. If you guys don't do anything, then the project is not going to support you. And this is going to be a growing trend. People think that, oh yeah, Raven Coin will be able to support all that hash rate.
So miners are inherently lazy. There are some good apples, but as a general trend, just GPU miners are lazy. And it's really up to... Yes.
How dare you?
How
dare you?
It's up to two things. It's up to the mining pools as well as the core developers to basically... This is going to sound bad, but I don't know of a better analogy. Miners are sheep and you are shepherds. And it's up to the mining pools and the core developers to herd the sheep. So mining pools over in Bitcoin, right? They are all very good friends. They all coordinate. If there's ever an issue where too much hash rate sits at one pool, the mining pools go to Twitter, they talk about it, and they, shuffle hash rate over. Sometimes even using proxies to route hash rate from one pool to another. It's very much a thing that's done on the mining pool layer. And so two miners should be taking a stand and helping diversify some of that hash rate for the health of the ecosystem and also for their damn reputation. And the fact that they're not shows me that they really do not understand the risks of centralized hash rate, all the risks that we've already been through for those of us that were here in 2010 and 2011, and two, that they really don't care about the project. I don't expect GPU miners to switch off because knowing FIRO's community, a lot of them probably don't pay attention. A lot of them probably just set their rigs and forget. And the second is that it is up to the core developers to curtail the protocol or adjust the protocol every now and then so that, miners still have a place, they're still a part of the ecosystem, but they're not a majority part. So this is what Ethereum did really well. It curtailed rewards, it added on the difficulty bomb, It said miners have a place, but so do users, so do node operators, so do all these parts of the infrastructure in the stack, so that you would get good coordination. I honestly think I think that masternodes might have killed FIRO's ecosystem, because once you introduce masternodes, miners didn't really have a need or a role, and so what do you think about that, Vosk? Have you seen any ecosystem that's had both mining as well as masternodes, so this hybrid proof of work, proof of stake, where it's worked?
Maybe you're inclined to point a finger at masternodes because we're like searching for a reason, right? But I think we've just we've watched GPU mining as a community and ecosystem degrade year over year over year. And I think I think again, I don't mean to blame some major projects, but like when ASIC miners come out unannounced, and you last week built out a GPU mining rig for maybe thousands of dollars, and that can be a very substantial sum to very many people. And then the next week, unannounced, an ASIC miner comes out for the coin you were planning, started, excited to mine, and then that project doesn't take any sort of stance to protect the GPU miners with, say, a new mining algorithm, or like on the front of making an algorithm that equalizes ASIC miners and multi-purpose hardware like graphics cards. When there's nothing like that there, that's how you end up with this apathetic mining community that it's almost like, you think mining's cool, but you're like a sad boy, they call them in this era. You're like, mining's cool, but nobody cares about me. So I don't really care about anybody else. It's almost like GPU miners, like as a whole, you could view them through like they're like kind of depressed in a way. There's not enough projects kind of picking them up, empowering them, and be like, come mine for us. I think from a protocol level, there's a lot of things that aren't happening, and I'm no developer. I don't know, exactly how we can implement these things, but like some things that come to mind, longevity rewards, right? So let's say you're mining a coin, and you get 50% of your coins today, and you get 50% paid out over the next year. I remember a couple years ago, Zuko, which I personally don't really, I don't really like them. From the things I've seen and read and whatever else, just to preface it. And I was like, what the hell is he talking about? Time locking rewards for a year? That's ridiculous. But I've been like, this is the stuff that keeps me up at night, probably like you both too. Is I'm just like, how can I like do my part to save mining? Like, there's gotta be a way, and there's problems that I can help solve, even from like a content creator point of view, or at least try to contribute and be a positive force. And so maybe instead of having all your rewards come out that day, there is some kind of time lock period, or there's like a ramp up period. So like, you start mining, you get 50% rewards, but then they slowly build up, and you have, and it's not just that, but that's just like one example that comes to mind, is basically rewarding good behavior and longevity and support, instead of having the profit switching miners that look at what to mine. Oh, this coin's a top today, I'm gonna go mine that. This coin's a top today, I'm gonna go mine that. Because that mindset breeds dumping, not caring, not being involved. You're chasing dollar bills, you're not chasing stacking sats or building up your Ethereum or your FIRO or any other coin. And it's that profit chasing mindset, and how too many people in this era look at cryptocurrencies and they compare them to the dollar fiat value, and not just like way back when I was just like, man, I want 100 of this coin. And then I look at the supply of this and maybe the market cap. I'm like, ooh, I need 1,000 of those. This is getting exciting. And now it's just all about, I mine X dollars on this, or I made $1,000 mining this month. And I've actually had to revamp our content to be interesting on that front. My videos start with, I mined $81 a day. How did I do it? What did I use? And all the other details. But people, if I said I mined 47 Kadena today, people would be like, okay, But if you're in the know, you're like, oh wow, that's a lot of money, in a fiat value. But again, I think part of it comes back to a lot of things have become too easy.
ASICs have made things just incredibly easy, and that's just, there's a lot of people that in the period of 2018 to 2020 were working on these turnkey GPU miners with beautiful, elegant software. And the idea was just to have it to be set and forget. When, to your point, what we remembered about GPU mining was you would struggle setting up a GPU miner, and that would teach you so much. And you jump into a community, and the community would help you, and they'd get your, they'd help you flash your vBIOS and teach you about what right configs to use and what pool to mine to. It was a very collaborative, nurturing environment. And that's because everyone there was there for the same ideals and reason. They believed in the project. That was spec mining. And it was because exchanges weren't in the mix. There was no fiat value usually attached to the coin. Remember back in the days when it was all OTC. So that's what really kept Ravencoin's community for so long, in my opinion, because they didn't, for a while, they weren't on any exchange. It was all OTC trading. It was all very organic, right? And so everyone that was mining it because they believed in the project. And to your point about GPU miners being sad and depressed, I completely agree. Do you know over 30% of the hate that I got for Prog Power came from GPU miners? We created, if Def Else and I created something fantastic, for the GPU mining community, free of charge, highly audited, taught, I think, the whole space about hardware. And GPU miners were probably some of the most toxic, abusive people. Everything from, oh, you're favoring AMD because this particular model gets 10 watts higher per mega hash.
Kristy works for NVIDIA. They're paying her millions. I remember that one.
Yes, I'm still waiting for my paycheck. Yeah, it just so toxic. And that was not the ASIC miners doing that. That was the GPU miners who got caught up in all of the FUD and all of the drama. And a big part of it as well, like FPGA miners at the time as well were piling in on the abuse. And I think GPU miners have made their own bed. I mean, Prog Pow could have gone a very different route if at the time the GPU miners had showed a united force and had actually made their voices heard like they originally did. But instead, they fell to all of the FUD from an ASIC manufacturer that imploded as soon as Prog Pow was launched on Ravencoin. Lindsay, who was the biggest antagonist, is gone, disappeared off the face of the map. Surprise there. And yeah, they did it. I mean, Prog Pow was really their last hope of making a safe coin, and they killed it. And you look at coins like Ravencoin. I see other smaller coins that are using variants, but even FIRO. I mean, ASICs aren't going to go there. No one is going to build an ASIC for Prog Pow. People might build a GPU, like Silicon is doing right now, but at least then everyone would be in the same kind of level of efficiency and earnings. And yeah, I don't know how to fix that ecosystem. I like your idea about time-locked rewards for mining, but that's also something that mining pools can do, and they kind of do, right? They put a threshold on payouts. Mining pools could just get more involved in the ecosystem in general. And at least in Ethereum, they do. They're some of the biggest backers. And even with Ethereum has a lot of complexity and issues with MEV right now, and mining pools have really rallied in support with Flashbots and have helped providing Flashbots software to miners and making sure that mining pools can play a really important part in routing these bundles and providing protection for all of Ethereum. And so that's been, a nice scenario where it's worked out very well. Yeah, I mean, I don't, Dash is another great example I like to point to, where even though they're not GPU mining, they're ASIC mining, but they also have master nodes. That community is dead. It is. I like the Dash team. I like what they're trying to do, but their community is just so small, and no one wants to make hardware for Dash anymore either. Why would you? Dogecoin has virtually no miners left. No one's going to make new hardware for Dogecoin. That's the thing we don't talk much about ASIC mining as well. What happens when ASIC manufacturers just stop producing hardware? At least with GPUs, we get consistent, steady hardware, right? Because it's not tied to this industry.
A new problem that has surfaced on that front is people are respecting cryptocurrency more than ever before. They know it's not going away, and they know that there's just all this money to be made. And money to be made breeds greed, and that breeds all of these potential actors of wanting to get in and make hardware. And like you said, they could go away, and that could be an issue. Um, but then like there's always the conspiracies of, well, Nvidia is going to release all these mining focused GPUs and they're just going to sell them out of the back lot, like private deals, and those never hit the public market. And then you have a centralized level of GPU mining, or with the ASIC mining front, how much money can you make developing an ASIC miner in private? If it costs you, say, $1 million, but your returns are well, I don't even need to throw numbers, that's not the point. Whatever your return is, it's the person who has enough money to fund a private ASIC to be potentially developed and built, they probably also have the funds just to have their own mining farm. And why would you bring that to market? And why would you bring that to market unless you're a good actor, right? There, and that could be the case, and that's incredible. And I guess just to leak, I'd love your guys' feedback on it. Another thing I've thought about is, and it's a little lame, it's a little centralized in a way for crypto, but let's say you have ASIC miners, but you need to have some sort of onboarding, right? So I saw with like Helium, they have their onboarding fee, and they take a centralized level of control in their ecosystem. And if you had something like that in relation to ASIC miners, or you could even just have that in relation to GPU miners, you create some kind of intermediary that regulates or even like reviews and keeps track of like what hardware is coming onto your ecosystem, and maybe having a fee to get on. And if you leave for like a certain amount of time, then you have to pay it again. And these kind of punishments could help keep people committed to an ecosystem. And I don't know, it sounds lame. It's like I feel like we have to become like the overbearing parent at this point because our kids are being bad. So we're going to need some new rules to get you guys in line. Otherwise, we're not going to mine anymore. And like what mechanisms can we deploy to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior? Where we don't just have the people profit switching and auto dumping, and that will hopefully breed, committed community members. But I don't want to sound like, centralized and controlling either, but in comparison, what we're currently doing isn't working. And, just where can we kind of go with this? And I think some sort of like a hardware onboarding could be an interesting route. And then you also know what's on your network. So there's no secret ASIC mining farm that pops up and you're like, what the is this 20% of hash rate on our network? Because honestly, it's scary. It's scary. What are these? Where'd they come from? And it devalues the miner's proposition of, well, like, I don't want to mine this coin. I don't want to mine VoskCoin because there's 20% of miners on the network that we don't even know what they are. And, that could be a scary, new ASIC miner that they can't get that's way more efficient. Or an FPGA mining is, kind of creeping in and eating a bunch of profitability. And that kind of actor normally is a complete leech and doesn't contribute to your ecosystem. But again, we deal with like all these random complex problems like being proof of work and mineable.
I think one of the things that, I just wanted to kind of like slightly off topic, but kind of also relatable was I think GPU miners also don't often appreciate what it takes to make a GPU friendly algorithm, right? Obviously, Kristy knows, right? She created PoW, right? And I've asked certain people, and obviously, PoW is a much more superior algorithm to MTP, right? Like in almost all aspects, and yet when we switched, we got actually quite a lot of flack to say, oh, this new algorithm is really making my GPU hot. It's consuming a lot more electricity, and it's burning up my cards, right? Without realizing that, well, first of all, GPUs are designed, to operate at those temperatures, right? And at the same time, if you want like ASIC or FPGA resistance, you have to kind of like really make the GPU your ASIC, and therefore basically maximizing the usage, right? Then I found it frustrating that people saw it as this was something that we did for the long term. There are many other projects who are claimed to be GPU mineable, but they come up with maybe half-ass algorithms, which will probably have FPGAs on them, right? But it's very hard to detect, right? But they can still say, oh yeah, a GPU mineable, our special algorithm and whatnot. But because FIRO is kind of in a unique position where we actually had to go through this like whole nightmare of trying to build a mining algorithm, even when we weren't hardware specialists. We kind of had like first-hand experience of what that meant, right? Because even before MTP, we were on something called Lyra 2Z, and before that we were like on the CPU mineable algorithm, and we were raped by FPGAs on Lyra 2Z, and we really experienced everything. When we were CPU mine, we got hit by botnets, we got hit by people doing cloud mining and stuff, and that's how we kind of settled into the GPU mining. Like, GPU mining is the best thing for FIRO, right? And I just felt like, I just wanted to get out there like, hey, it's not that we designed this algorithm to be more power hungry or anything like that. It's because that's the cost of an ASIC FPGA resistant algorithm, right? Yeah.
People honestly wouldn't be complaining about the power cost if their rigs if Ethereum had been efficient from the start. Like, no one complains about the energy consumption that a gaming card uses when you're playing a video game. Who cares if your card consumes 300 watts if it's playing Elden Ring? You don't complain about it, right? And if Ethereum had been efficient from the start, or let me clarify, if Ethash had been efficient from the start, miners wouldn't be complaining. But miners were very lazy. They used cheap power cables. They used cheap risers. They used crappy V-BIOSes off the internet that they have no idea what those V-BIOSes actually do. And they deployed it to their rigs, and now they complain because they're going to get wrecked on every other algorithm. Because Ethash was, a crappy designed algorithm. And you look over on, I had this discussion before over in the Bitcoin industry, where it was posed to me, why don't we make a more energy efficient algorithm on Bitcoin? Say we change from SHA-256D to something else and it consumes 50% less power. All that is going to happen is miners have now freed up 50% of their power in their data center, and they're going to go buy 50% more hardware, deploy it to get the same density. Like, it doesn't matter how much energy. Yeah, it doesn't matter how much energy the algorithm consumes. Miners are just going to go and buy more hardware to use up what energy they have. That's all proof of work, is converting energy into dollars. Every single kind of proof of work. RandomX, ProgPoW, SHA-256D.
I do want to have a counterpoint though. Like, if there is an efficient option available, it can lower the barrier to entry, especially for smaller miners, hobbyists, other deployments like that. Like, for example, like with Gold Shell, I think the fact that they make the box miners, the little the small ones, is really cool, because we've watched Bitmain year over year basically just pillage. They're having a great time.
That's not an issue with the algorithm, though. There's nothing stopping Bitmain from making a home miner. And actually, there are some companies working on Bitcoin home miners. It's just because Bitmain
did make a few home. Yeah, they did. It was this passive hold. I bought one or two of those, and
yeah, but it's been like 5 years since they had anything like that. Remember the little Litecoin router?
Yes. That's not the algorithm's fault, right? It's the design of the machine. Because also, a counterpoint is nothing stops the Goldshell team from making a enterprise handshake ASIC, which only takes 240 volts, and they'll get way more density. It's just that they chose to design their machine for the house first.
On the other hand, to kind of take it a step further, what do you think about a different sort of proof of work network like Helium, and the way you have these basically little Raspberry Pis and simplify, you're mining with radio waves and you're building a radio wave network?
Helium is wonderful. I love Helium, and what they did right from the start is they said, look, here's our mission, here's our vision. We need as many of these small devices in everyone's homes. The mining was tied to a use case, and it was tied to a product day one, and it was in the white paper that this was something that had to be massively decentralized. If you look back, Bitcoin, Satoshi talked about eventually this running in data centers at scale. If you look back at Ethereum, data centers were inevitable. Helium was always targeting decentralization, 1 rig per user, because that's the entire point, right? And the way that the algorithm is designed is that it's about coverage you provide that you'll get rewards from. If you just have like 100 boxes in one house, your rewards are going to deprecate a little bit.
But what if we took a model similar to that? Like if we applied that to other proof of work algorithms, right? So we kind of push back against industrialization mining farms. And then we have, there's a couple of different ways to do it, but basically if you ping locations and it's like, okay, you can only have 1 unit here or 2 units here. But again, we get towards like centralization, and that's kind of lame. But how do we the biggest benefit with mining is more people involved, my opinion. Like 1 mining farm versus 10,000 individual miners. I'd rather take 10,000 people who are interested in my product. They're talking about it with their friends. They're making a stupid TikTok video that goes viral for some reason, and that's a big value add other than hoping that this mining farm that's probably a cash business participates to any degree other than just crunching the proof of work numbers.
So there's a few ways to do it. The first is, and this is something that I'm working on that Reuben knows, I'm working on a layer 1 protocol that brings back spec mining, but also allows CPU, GPU, and ASIC mining all at once. And the idea is that it's a omni-chain with shards, and every shard has basically a specific type of machine it's best suited for. So, you'd have a dedicated shard for zero-knowledge proofs, which would be best suited for FPGAs. But a specific type of circuit for a zero-knowledge proof might be suited to GPUs. When a miner first connects to the network, there's a quick benchmark that's performed. It pulls the ASIC ID of your machine. This is a different name depending on the device, but it could be like your UID, your machine ID. Basically, if you've got silicon in your device, there's a unique identifier, which gives you your Sybil resistance. Those numbers are known ahead of time. Like we can get them from fabs and manufacturers. It's pretty difficult to spoof them. Not impossible, but difficult. And it does a quick benchmark on your machine and then says, based upon your machine specs, here are the chains you currently should be mining. And you get so many slots in your miner that allows you to mine to different chains. That's one way to handle it. The second is, again, going back to that ASIC ID route, only allow GPU ASIC IDs on your network. Great way. And that is something that could have been implemented in Ethereum, but people weren't willing to do the engineering lift and shift that it would require. And it would only be something mining pools would have to implement and potentially the protocol. So you would need to check a rig for a valid CPU ID and ASIC ID from the GPU combo. And you would say that, a CPU ID could be paired with up to 16 GPUs. You'd store that in a database and you'd keep track. And anytime a new entrant comes in, that's an unknown number, it's not on the GPU ID list or the ASIC ID list, you wouldn't let it connect. You would be able to keep ASICs off the network just using something that is available to everyone sitting in the firmware. People just don't pay attention to this. But again, developers were really lazy and not willing to educate or learn. That was the resistance we found. And I've talked with other projects about this. And again, the feedback I've always gotten is, well, that's too much effort.
Wouldn't it be a privacy risk there, especially since like miners will be kind of tied to a unique identity?
You're already tied. Your entire, right now, whatever hardware you have in your whatever machines you're working on right now.
I'm not reporting it, right? I'm like I'm mining, like I'm not reporting.
But you are reporting it. You're reporting it to your driver. You're reporting it to your browser. Your browser is broadcasting it across the internet. Yeah, you're broadcasting all of this detail about your hardware as you're using your computer. And it's
yes, but when I'm mining, I'm not broadcasting that data, right? Because I'm just.
But you don't need to broadcast it. The client just does a check, right? And it can be a salted hash, so the data is never de-anonymized. It's just no different to just build a really quick gossip network. And sorry, there are sirens right outside my house. I wonder, they've come to drag me back.
They're coming to get you. No more decentralization.
Yeah. There wouldn't necessarily be a privacy risk. You just don't broadcast it out to the network. It's just something you broadcast to the client, and the client does a quick check of all known GPU IDs. And again, this is something that is available and could be available to, you could get it from the manufacturers themselves. I'm sure they'd be willing to support this initiative, but you also can know what the basically the formula is, and just check for, does the number match this formula? You never need to broadcast it. It's not like it gets tied. But even if it does, do you really care if someone knows your ASIC ID? When you share a vBIOS over the internet, your ASIC ID is embedded in the vBIOS. That's how NVIDIA tracks which miners have leaked really confidential firmware. I mean, this stuff is already out there. When you use Claymore Miner, it's pulling your ASIC ID.
Well, I mean, I don't think anyone sends not. I never send VBO biases or stuff like that. I'm not. I guess I'm a more typical, right?
But miners do. Miners are. I see them do some really weird stuff where someone will drop a vBIOS in Discord, advertise that it's got this insane hash rate, and people will download it and flash it. Miners are weird. And so my point is that a random number isn't necessarily, valuable to you, and it's not something that would de-anonymize you. That data is already there. It's already broadcast. You can already scrape it just from your web browser or cookie. So you're already throwing it out there. And it doesn't do anything. If I know that you have GPU 862, so what? What am I going to do with that information? I can't get your name. I can get when that GPU was created and what temperature that the exact wafer that it was carved from. And the date of the wafer. I can get a bunch of absolutely useless information, but nothing that actually reveals anything about you as a person. So that is one way to handle it, and that would allow you to have effectively a lot of safety without changing your algorithm. but it requires engineering effort. And we all know that most proof of work coins don't have the best development teams.
Well, one of the things I just wanted to kind of touch on is, the difficulty of bootstrapping a pure GPU proof of work mineable coin nowadays. I mean, so many coins have been attacked, right? I mean, Reuben coin, I think, got 51% attack in 2018. I don't think many people know about that. FIRO got 51% attack. Beam got 51% attack. And all of us were GPU mineable coins, right? And obviously you say like, oh yeah, this hybrid systems don't work. But at the same time, as a smaller coin, it's tough, right? Like we almost, with that 51% attack, we were almost delisted. Like, that was how serious it was. It was a whole days of rollback, and the damage was very, very high. And the exchanges are saying, are you going to compensate us, right? I mean, that's the reality, right? And to kind of expect non-hybrid systems, especially for the smaller coins, I mean, I think all those like proof of work maximalists, like, no, we just want pure proof of work and stuff like that, until they are probably like, on something like Monero or Bitcoin or Ethereum, where they are the dominant coin for that particular hardware class, right? But for other coins, even if we want to do, it's not practical to do it. So we've seen like, various strategies. Some have kept pure proof of work, but like, maybe set like a very arbitrary max reorganization limit, or this type of stopgap solution. Some use delegated proof of DAO PoW, trust a bunch of notary nodes, right? Or they have like the master node systems that do chain locks, or like Decred, which also has a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake, right? So I mean, people say like, oh, 51% attack is a feature, not the flaw, and I kind of disagree. Like, it's just like the nature of pure proof of work consensus mechanism is not a desirable trait by any means. We all want finality. We all want, I want to know that my stuff is confirmed in one confirmation, or not like wait for, how many confirmations should I wait for this, right? So, I kind of want to hear you guys' thoughts on that, because really, I don't see the viability of having a pure proof of work chain if you're kind of starting from scratch, especially if it's GPU mine. ASICs maybe, but pure GPU mine with the stuff like nice hash about, and we were attacked not by nice hash, we were attacked by a what appears to be a rented GPU farm, like, right? So these things are very, very possible. Yeah.
From my point of view, and this is something that's really degraded proof of work from my point of view over the years, which makes me really sad to say. Again, I just want to reiterate that. But as we move forward in the crypto timeline, it's more profitable than ever, like, roughly speaking, on average, year over year, to mine cryptocurrencies. The amount of dollars per day in minted coins is very high. Like, the amount of revenue you can make from mining Bitcoin, mining Ethereum alone, let alone all the others, is, very, very high. So we have so many mining farms built out. We have so many just industrial grade mining farms. There's so much hardware out there and deployed. And again, a lot of this comes back to like cash businesses or even like nefarious actors. And it's like, well, hey, like, you're going to mine $1 million this month. How about I just give you 2 million and you let me run all the hardware? The mining farms will be like, sweet, I doubled my profits this month, and sure, I'll sync it to you. And then they take that hardware and they attack your network. And it's just, the more concentrated mining is, in big farms, you have this kind of potential risk. It's a centralization issue. And obviously there's a lot of good actors and everything else. I don't just want to like throw shade, right, on all the big farms. But, the state of mining today versus 5 years ago are so radically different. And basically it's the the ecosystem is just it's ripe to be taken advantage of in a way. But the counterpoint is that there's more hardware deployed, so you need even more hardware to try to, commandeer it. That's true for major projects, but once you get off the basically Bitcoin and Ethereum, the hash rates are minuscule in comparison. And what Ethereum has done is brought so many GPUs online for mining. The hash that is sitting on there is unreal. And this is where a lot of people like to, like give me a bunch of flack and whatever else. Like some people think I hate GPU mining now. I'm just like, dude, I'm not oblivious to the fact that there is so much hardware sitting on Ethereum, and Ethereum is doing everything they can, albeit they're very slow, they're like a slug, to get away from proof of work. What happens when all of that becomes available? It's going to flood onto these other chains. It's going to plummet hardware prices. We're going to see people make jokes like you can't afford a GPU now, even though recently prices have started to come down. In the future, it's going to be possible that with your computer build, the graphics card is going to be your cheapest thing, and that it all depends. If there's not money to be made, people are finicky, simple. They're, like you referenced earlier, sheep, right? They're just going to be like, well, screw this. I'd rather have $100 than nothing. And there goes, latest gen hardware.
Not just that, man. Think of all the ASICs sitting on Ethereum. They're 30% of that hash rate. And mind you, this was 2020 when I last did that. 30% of the hash rate was ETH ASICs. What happens to those? They don't go anywhere. They just go into a landfill.
Oh, yeah. That's the other issue. We got the e-waste, right? We've got maybe a firmware update to try to bring them to a different algo, maybe if that's possible. Or of course, we're going to get Ethereum, fork 1 through 20, that it's going to try to maintain the algo. And then all these people are going to try to blindly rally behind it. Like, hey, here's Jeff. He made a crypto today. But don't worry, he's saving your Ethereum ASIC. And so, that's how we got things like WoW Narrow,
I get pitched an Ethereum fork nearly every day now. Miners reaching out going, hey, it's one of two camps. It's the ASIC miners going, hey, we're going to do an ethash fork. Will you come help us? Or the second is, hey, we're going to do a prog PoW fork. Will you come help us? And it's like, no, both of you are really stupid because the dApps are never going to come over. The dApps are where the value is. Ethereum Classic has moved over to a Ketchak, which is just overrun by FPGAs now. Their team is very arrogant and sadly very toxic. Bob Somerville was so convinced that prog PoW was the brainchild of Craig Wright and AMD and NVIDIA, and I don't even know how.
I haven't heard his name in a while. Remember his list? He had all those people on the list.
Yeah, me and Andrea LaFranche are on there, plus a bunch of ETH core devs.
And poor Grierso,
Yes, Grierso and Greg Colvin as well. Like he's literally, his entire chain is built on Ethereum, and like all the work that's done on the EVM and all the work that's done on Geth and all of the clients, and then he goes and shit talks all those people. He's very lucky he has Barry backing him. That's all I'll say. But ultimately, Ethereum Classic is going to have a really difficult time because those miners aren't going to switch to Ethereum Classic. You might get 10% of the hash rate, and then they'll see their rewards start to drop. The FPGA miners will completely push them out, and Bitmain has stopped making hardware for altcoins as well. Has anyone noticed that? They've really just doubled down on only making Bitcoin miners. And who's going to realistically make a ASIC just for mining Ethereum Classic? They won't. The Ethereum Classic ecosystem might have a high block reward, but it doesn't have the long-term staying power that Ethereum does. So if you're an ASIC manufacturer, you're more likely going to start doing research and development on a zero-knowledge proof ASIC to come over into the Ethereum and get, a slice of all of those layer 2 protocols. And I share your concern about the hardware. I've noticed that there's a growing trend of bigger public companies that have invested in GPU mining hardware, trying to now create alternative use cases. So they're trying to develop, rendering farms. They're trying to build, HPC clusters, and they don't know the first thing about that. There's a company that's successfully done it, CoreWeave. They went the last crypto winter. They went and snapped up a ton of GPU hardware from miners, brought it dirt cheap, and then built a successful rendering product. They now actually serve quite a lot of the AI industry. They're the backers, the infrastructure to AI Dungeon. They serve a lot of the VFX industry. But I know that team pretty well. It was a lot of engineering effort and a lot of man hours. The end result is a lot of that hardware is actually going to go to Taiwan or China, where there's huge demand for GPU compute, but there's not enough supply right now. And I think that it's going to be sold in bulk. And I think these numbers could be a little bit off, but we're at about 27 million units of GPU cards right now on Ethereum. And that's the lower estimate. Upper estimate would be around 52 million units of GPU cards. But again, I haven't done the numbers and checked on the ASICs in a while. So at least 30% of that will probably scatter. That'll go to Ravencoin, that'll go to FIRO, that'll go like anywhere it can mine, because that's in the hands of actually individuals. I've been pleasantly surprised that Ethereum's managed to maintain its user base of individual and hobby miners, or as I like to call them, the garage miners. But the rest of the hash rate, it's going to be sold to Hive Blockchain, Hut 8, some of the bigger public companies that are building out kind of alternate compute facilities, maybe Genesis Digital Assets. It's just going to be sold elsewhere to where it can be repurposed, and then it's going to get flooded on eBay and Newegg and the secondhand market when there are no buyers in the HPC industry, because you don't need that much compute over there. You simply don't. And yeah, it's going to be disastrous, and I would have liked to see more innovation and more research on how we can use all of this compute for zero knowledge proofs. And instead, paradigms just jump straight into, hey, let's just go research how to use FPGAs and give new life to the BCU 1525s, of which there's only like 20,000 floating around. I mean, Ethereum's creating a lot of this e-waste by their own prioritization with what kind of hardware they're using.
Obviously, this shift of Ethereum into proof of stake is gonna be probably the biggest shakeup ever in GPU mining, right? Like it's the most I think the most momentous thing that's going to happen to like the whole GPU mining ecosystem. And of course, you alluded, like, some of this hash rate will go here and there, but what do you think actually is the effect, right? Because obviously I think there's some, to me, I mean, my hopes aren't up, but obviously there are some people who's think that somehow all this hash rate will flow to all these GPU mineable coins and cause it to pump. I mean, I don't understand the logic of that. I mean, I would kind of like to understand why they think that, because unlike like ASICs manufacturers, which have a lot of money and they want to sell their ASICs, and therefore there is some incentive for them to like push up the price to sell their ASICs, at least that kind of makes sense a little bit. But now, like with GPU mining, that isn't really the case, right? So I just was curious, like both of you's thoughts on like what do you think is going to happen to all these other GPU mineable coins? Are we just going to be seeing more 51% attacks, or are we going to be seeing like, oh wow, GPU miners are going to be supporting these projects and these projects will flourish, right? So there's a big, obviously as a smaller coin, I was thinking maybe, I mean, I don't have my hopes up, but maybe because this is such a big shift, maybe we should be waiting before we change our tokenomics to see what happens, right? But Yeah, I just was very curious of what you guys think would happen.
You know, I consider them kind of like the dreamers. You know, it's these people who they're like, oh man, so like after Ethereum, everyone's gonna go to Ravencoin, like it's gonna go to the moon, and like, oh, everyone's gonna go to like say like FIRO, and it's gonna go to the moon. But I'm like, dude, is it? You think it's that simple? You know, it's just everybody's gonna come over. Ethereum block party's done. You know, now we're over here, and that's gonna be a $20 billion project, and it's gonna be able to soak up a lot of that, just hash rate, a lot of that hardware. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that the sell pressure is going to be so high because I mean, you're bringing, you think like we're building a house, right? You know, when we've got one construction crew there. It's all we need, right? Two comes and we can still be profitable, right? You know, we're going to split it up, whatever. 100 construction crews show up to build one house. No one's making any money. And now what? You know, whoever has the cheapest materials, cheapest electricity, they can build it for the best price. They're probably going to be the ones that last. There's just going to be blood in the streets, and it's a very difficult situation, and it's just basically there's nothing that can soak up even. I don't believe even probably 10% of what's on Ethereum's network. If we round up, let's say all the other projects combined in cryptocurrency that could use, say, graphics cards, would be able to soak up 25%. Well, what do we do with the remaining 75%? Right? Obviously, some people are just like, okay, Ethereum's done. I had a good time. I'm just going to sell the hardware. Well, that also lowers the barrier to entry to get into it. So then some people that couldn't afford to get into it may get into it. And you have hobbyists at that level that maybe don't care about profits and they just want to do it. Well, that hurts the bottom line. Then you have mining farms with cheap electric that can outlast all of these people paying residential electric rates. Every way I look at it is that 90% of things are negative, and it's going to crush profitability. It's going to be such a toxic environment. When people aren't making a lot of money in crypto, they start whining, they start crying, they start blaming everyone but themselves. And it's just honestly, it's gonna be kind of miserable, we've all been in the space a while. I think we'll all outlast it. A lot of these people won't, and they're gonna cry on their way out the door. The positive, though, I will say, is we're going to finally have these lazy miners, like, to take your word there, Chris. We got these sheeps, and there's no grass to eat. There's nothing to chew on it. They got to find something else, or they're gonna die. So they're gonna finally pull the wool back a little bit and be like, "Oh, man, look at this project. That's kind of cool." And hopefully, you do get an influx of new community members. Hopefully, you get record visits to the site, wallet downloads, miner downloads, network hash rate, right? Unfortunately, as people, start crawling out and searching, they may find projects that interest them, but a lot of people are going to be looking for those same good projects, and then the profitability will crumble, and when those profits crumble, you're going to see the nasty side of humans, which is just greed and ugliness, and again, just a lot of toxicity. I think you both remember, 28, like the end of 2018 and like 2019, or yeah, 2018, 2019. It was kind of like miserable. Like it just there's so much toxicity, so many just mean, rude comments, pointing fingers. Everyone's an idiot. It's just, oh, you know what? Like, welcome to like the real bear market. Prices have pulled back, but mining is still incredibly profitable across the board with everything. And if almost every graphics card still makes more money at a residential electric rate than it burns in electricity, we are still not in like a bloody, cold bear market for mining. And that's where we're still at. Most things still make money. They make less money, but we haven't seen the bottom yet. And that's gonna bring out the worst. And people who are used to making, say, $10 a day, and now they're making $1 a day, maybe they're even losing on electricity. That's not like, you think like you go to an interview, right? And you're in a terrible mood. It's just not going to be a good time. I don't really want you here, man. I don't really think you're in a good state. Come back in a year when prices pick up or something. And I don't know. I hate to sound so negative, but just every way I look at it, it's just pretty. But Kristy, I'd love to hear your point of view. I hope that it's better than mine.
I I I agree with you that it's going to be miserable. A lot of projects assume that miner inflows and miners coming into their coin will magically make the prices lift. And the thing is that what makes those prices lift is if you have, Reuben knows I love to use the analogy of taps and sinks, again, coming from the video game industry, where mining is your tap, it's your creation point of new coins, and then sinks are how you take coins out of the ecosystem or lock it up. And Ethereum had a really good tap and sink because, again, miners would mine coins and then reinvest that back into more GPUs. When we switch over and miners go to these other altcoins, those sinks are non existent. There are going to be no more purchasing of new GPUs. Why on earth would you do that? Miners have already purchased, now they need to basically start just mining. And so they're going to come into these altcoins, and like you said, the sell pressure is going to be insane. And most of these altcoins don't have utility. So that means they don't have other sinks beyond payments. And this is true for pretty much all of the altcoins right now. You know, when you mine one Ethereum, that one ETH can go into so many different things. It can go into your layer 2 protocols, into yield farming on a bajillion different protocols. It can go into NFTs, like it can just get spread in so many different areas because Ethereum is this vast dark forest. But over in altcoin land, you can only really do, you know, one thing. You can hold it or you can sell it. Maybe you can make some NFTs. Maybe you can lock it up or do some DEX trades, but there's just not a lot of utility. So miners aren't going to hold the coin. They're going to dump it as soon as they can. And yeah, they're going to become really apathetic and toxic. And then they're going to start blaming the project. And they're going to start putting pressure on the core team and pressure on all the other new users.
You really articulated an excellent point on several fronts. And it also makes me think a few things like that really contributed to Ethereum's success while also being mineable. I mined a bunch of the Ethereum I mined. I turned it into tokens that were on the chain. There were, like in the previous cycle, say like I'd mined like maybe into my Exodus, right? And so it's a wallet I have custody of, which is great. And then I use Shapeshift, right, which they built in, or I used online back when it was easy to use and whatever else. And I was just shape-shifting into other coins with my mined coins. And even though that is a sell pressure, but if I'm going into ERC20 tokens and I'm kind of powering this network and I'm paying these Ethereum transaction fees, I'm still contributing to like the utility, the use case, and the inherent value of this coin. Then I guess that was 2 cycles ago. So then the previous cycle, obviously we have DeFi, decentralized finance. Like you said, NFT is all these layer 2 dApps, decentralized applications. And all of these dApps drove utility. I mean, honestly, a lot of times I was just putting my mind Ethereum towards my gas fees. It's a pretty bad user experience, but again, here I am using my Ethereum in the ecosystem. And a lot of these other projects, they don't have that. And it's all of these unique things that really prop up ETH, and it's very difficult. It's why Ethereum is the benchmark, and it is such a unique use case, it's just such a unique case. It's just so interesting to study from every angle, and so like if you brought a bunch of miners to Ethereum, maybe you could make a little bit more of a case that this could have a positive value impact. But like you said, it's hold or sell, and kind of developing that use case, right? So like Reuben has masternodes. That's cool. That is something to aspire to do. Let's say I mine these coins, and I mine them up and I stack them up and my goal is to get a masternode, and then I get the masternode, and then I'm contributing in another way. And that is a way to add some utility. And then with that masternode, let's say I get voting rights. I become a part of the ecosystem. I mine my way into a masternode, and then I've essentially mined myself into a bigger voice in the community. Things like that are really cool, and I can really appreciate those. And they all fall under the umbrella of passive income. People who like mining, they like passive income most likely. Masternodes, staking, yield farming, right? These are all like, in a way, passive income. And that's how you appeal with different products to the same audience. And it's a lot of those things that have contributed to a lot of success, on these different blockchains. If these projects don't have that kind of infrastructure in place, like everything you mentioned, then we have the buy and sell. I think I don't mean to always hate on Ravencoin, but like I just think it's funny. Like everyone, like, the Ravencoin has assets, and I'm like, what do they do? Like, why do I want an asset? And it's just, I still haven't heard. If you have one, I'd love to hear it. But I just still haven't heard an interesting argument. Like, I want Ravencoin to succeed. I think it's cool that it's mineable, right? I think it's cool, but just what good does an asset do me when I can go on to Ethereum and I can make a decentralized trade? I can yield farm, I can buy an NFT, I can do all this stupid degen stuff, and whatever else. And where's that on these other chains if they want to be compared in a competitor?
So you touched on something pretty important, which is FIRO with masternodes, right? Mine your coins and then run a masternode, get a voice in the community. Now, I have a lot of strong words about DAOs, and to summarize, DAOs suck. Most people misunderstand them, and wisdom of the crowds do not work when you are designing a highly technical protocol. I mean, again, most people struggle to set up a miner. They should not be deciding, what is the tech direction on a protocol. But still, feeling like you're part of a community is pretty important. And there are other ways to give people a voice than having them make product and tech decisions. So what Ravencoin needs to do to succeed actually isn't utility. Utility has to be developed by the community. Ravencoin has a really strong community right now. And what they need to do to protect it is something similar to what Reuben's been proposing with the tokenomics proposal, which is reducing their block reward and splitting a percent into a community ecosystem fund to power all of these dApps, to basically fund all of these dApps and these utility projects. Wrap it up in quadratic funding so that all of the miners get a voice. And now they can actually vote on which projects get funded, which projects would be the most likely to contribute value to the ecosystem. That's what Ravencoin needs to do to succeed. And if it does it before this big surge of GPU hash rate comes in, they'll be able to survive, because now you actually have a sink for those coins. It goes into the developers and into the ecosystem. And ecosystem funding acts like a beacon to developers. It says, come over, come build on our chain. There's money here available for you. Put in the work and you will be able to make a living. And then slowly Ravencoin will be able to introduce something similar to MEV. Once they start getting all of that transaction volume from GPU miners, that'll add in more liquidity, it'll add in more funding. That's part of why I think, Reuben, with FIRO, we don't talk much about how important it is to reduce the block reward going to individual miners, because it's quite obvious they're not contributing back into the ecosystem and instead have a pot of money. I do stress that it shouldn't be controlled by individual community members right now, because the community has proven that they don't really know how to allocate that. Instead, put it up into a matching pool and let people vote with their money. Quadratic voting, right? Quadratic funding. So you don't decide, and it's not 12 people in the community deciding what projects get funded and what don't, because that opens that up to bribery attacks and all sorts of things. Let each individual user of the FIRO network vote. $1 per vote, $10 per vote. It's Gitcoin's model. Hell, even reach out to Gitcoin and just work on a platform with them. That would help the ecosystem quite a lot. And you'll slowly see, yes, some miners might drop off because profits have decreased, but all of a sudden, again, it'll be like a beacon. Developers will come, they'll get exposed to your chain, they'll start thinking about new ways to utilize FIRO because now they can make a full-time living if they're good.
I think, you know, like one of the things that especially people forget, that, you know, when they're saying like, why can't you be like Solana? Why can't you be like Avalanche? You know, why can't you fund an ecosystem, right? Obviously, I mean, you know, Avalanche and Solana, obviously their ecosystems are growing, and obviously still not to the same level as Ethereum, but they also have, you know, huge portions of their supply also, like, you know, earmarked for all these ecosystem funds, right? And in a way, how can a decentralized project like ours, where we're only getting like a small part of the block reward for development, compete with, you know, this hundreds of millions of dollars where there's just available for people to build on these chains, right? And obviously, you know, people would compare us, oh, you know, how about Monero, right? I mean, okay, well, Monero is kind of like an outlier, right? They have the community crowdfunding system. And I mean, for a project of that size, if you take a look at like how much it's actually like really being done, it's not a lot. It's not. I have an absolute respect of what they are doing, and you know, they've achieved quite a bit, but it's still nothing to the level of all these other centralized pre-allocated pre-sale coins, right? I mean, just like 1 or 2 years back, you know, the Monero Research Labs was almost like decimated, right? They lost all their full-time researchers, and which kind of like shows that even for such, you know, like a big project like Monero, decentralized funding models tend to always be underfunded, right? And we want to, that's why, like, you know, with the community fund, obviously I don't know if it would work, but I feel like it's a worthwhile experiment, right? Because like, if miners, you know, if they're just going to be mercenary, of course, obviously there's some outliers, obviously some do contribute to the ecosystem, but the vast majority don't. And if all they're going to do is to say is sell it on the exchange, I'd rather give this portion of money to someone who's going to try to do something for FIRO. It doesn't have to be development. It can be just like translating, you know, develop like you know, building documentation, having guides, shilling, covering us on a podcast. Now there's money to reward the community to do that. And yes, it may be sold, but it has created something for the project. It's like, rather than trusting the miners to give back, now I'm like, this thing is going to give back anyway. It may be so, but it has created something for the project. And I believe there's this economic theory where you can have inflation as long as that inflation is used to generate productive stuff. And I think that is kind of how we should see like community funding and things like that. Yeah, you know, yes, it's inflation. Yes, we are creating coins for the community to use, but you know, like, why should we be also giving it to miners, you know, if they're not that providing that security that much anymore? And you know, I'm not hating on miners. It's just a matter of thinking about how do we empower the community to like, you know, feel as this they're part of the project. Because projects with with a development fund, or like, you know, block reward or dev tax, I've not seen a single project that has a dev tax where the community is like, I want to do something really great for the project, because they're like, developers are getting something, the core team's getting something. I don't, you know, why should I do something, right? And I think that's a very big problem with dev tax. I mean, it does give, like, you know, like, it gave us the ability to build like really cool privacy protocols. It gave Zcash the ability to build like super great like Halo 2 and all of that. These are funded from the block rewards, but at the same time, it kind of, if you compare like the community of Zcash versus Monero, it's really different, right? Like it's like a world of difference. So yeah.
The solution, though, is Monero has something that's, it's not quadratic funding, but it's close to quadratic funding. It's the Monero, what is it? The Monero Community Fund?
CCS. The community crowdfunding system.
Got it. So that is a way where community members can rally around and have their voice heard. So the issue, dev tax isn't a problem. It is a tool, and like any tool, it just has to be used in the correct way. In Monero's case, while they don't have a dev tax, the community has an outlet for them to contribute funding, to get a social badge of honor, to feel good, to be contributing back to the project, and to be recognized for that. And that is what quadratic funding entails. If you look over on Gitcoin, it is an honor to be a judge in the Gitcoin grant ecosystem, but it's also you get an NFT, you get badges, it's gamified in a way. It's fun to contribute, and then you get to brag. Like you get bragging rights, which is nice.
That's what we're trying now. We're going to have like NFTs for contributors with special traits or depending on what they contribute.
And so dev tax can be done correctly. You just need to have that outlet for the community. It can't just be, here's a wallet that all of the funds go to, and you as project steward get to decide what projects it gets allocated to. That's not the right way to handle it, which is where Zcash messed up. Zcash could have and should have had.
Completely agree with you on that, because I remember seeing that their dev tax, and then they have you can submit the grants, and they have like a centralized review board, and it's a very slow turnaround time. And you compare that with Gitcoin and their quadratic funding, which is they've done such an incredible job with that overall. It's been phenomenal, and it's so cool. It's so fun. It's engaging. The donation periods are short. You get the funds in a quicker amount of time. You have to be. This is a very fast moving pace in the sector. Your funding is much more effective if it's quick too, and then like you said, the way they gamified it, I've had a lot of fun participating with Gitcoin over the last 1 or 2 years. It's fun, and the matching mechanism is such an interesting way to be like, wow, like I literally gave this project $1, but through the funding, because they're so popular, for my $1, they get an extra $50, and it really incentivizes you to contribute, because maybe I don't have much money, maybe I don't have many coins, but I still, it's like that positive reinforcement thing again. It's like you're heavily rewarded for participating, even if that reward is distributed to what you're supporting. Like that's still a reward, kind of like on your behalf. I've been a huge proponent of a percentage of the block reward going to proof of work projects, basically once I wrap my head around everything, because with no funding, you bleed out. And as we move forward in the crypto timeline, there's more projects than ever before. There's more money in the ecosystem than ever before. That means there's more VCs, there's more backers, there's more money being raised in sales, and there's just a whole lot of people with huge war chests. You can't compete, right? So, if, Reuben shows up with $200 million, and I'm like, hey, me and the, guys on the forum, we put together 20 grand, right? Like, now what? I mean, who do you think's gonna win? Reuben can be on every single crypto news site, TikTok, crypto YouTube, getting blasted across crypto Twitter, any crypto news, anything. He's got the budget for it, and it's not even a big deal. He blows that marketing budget, and then he still has a development budget. He's got the grant budget. He's got it. It's just literal firepower. And with, you compete against projects like that, and you don't have anything coming even close, you just get drowned out. I think that every project needs a proper funding mechanism that also scales and is aligned with the project. So, taking a portion of those block rewards, is much better. Say like if you took 10% more of the block reward, but you distribute that in a good way, maybe that 10%, instead of going to miners that aren't doing anything, maybe it goes to miners who want to participate on a second level, and you just funded a new podcast, right? And it's your sponsorship that makes him be able to dedicate a day a week to it, right? Maybe he needs that financial incentive. And, it's just hoping that just miners alone will have enough focus, efficiency, and drive to say mine enough coins, be like, what, I mined all this, it's going great, I'm gonna dedicate some of this to starting a podcast, and dedication of them for being mineable. It's just, you just don't see enough actors or I shouldn't say actors, you just don't see enough participants like that.
Yeah. And so Reuben, back to FIRO, yes, you should have, a community fund coming out of the block rewards, and absolutely the core team needs a percentage as well, because there's one thing we've learned from Ethereum: Gitcoin does not work well for client development. Client development is not milestone based, it's not rapid, it's slow, it's clunky. It is the kind of talent you need for client development is just different. And so the core team needs to be aligned with the growth of the protocol and the ecosystem, right? And I think the other thing you need to communicate to the community is, when you reduce the amount of money that's going straight to miners, you reduce the sell pressure on the entire market and the entire network. And so naturally, that's going to allow price to recover and price to appreciate. Because right now, you've got massive sell pressure. Again, no people are going to hate me for saying this, but when I say no utility, I mean, like, there's no dApps right now. It's just buy or sell. So you need to curb your rewards right now to match that buy and sell. And as you slowly build up utility, which your community will do if they have funding allocated to them, and which you will do as a core team if you have dedicated funding, then slowly you can start increasing the percentage if you need to. Or what will just happen is FIRO will, become 2x, 3x, 100x what it currently is now. And those miners will be incredibly happy, because guess what? Their power rates don't change. Their hardware cost doesn't change.
Yeah, I mean, like, if the fiat price goes up, like, it also actually, even if they get a smaller percentage of the pie, but now that the pie is bigger, I know this, but I think also, but I do think that, I don't want to blame that the price declines caused by miners and that, if you do the math, it's like, 10 to 12,000 US dollars a day of sell pressure, right? And our volumes are like, I don't know, 1.82 million dollars a day. Obviously, some of it is just wash traded from exchanges, but I don't think they, it's only a small part of the bigger problem, right? But obviously, any bit helps. But it's just more of like, hey, I really want to try to create this community fund to start having an educated community, because right now, we do have some really great contributors to the project. Like our Android and iOS wallet were developed and funded by the community, so like that's really nice. Like Arcadia, who did all of that. But at the same time, we want more people like that, and realistically we cannot hope for charity and people to do it on their free time. People need to be paid and rewarded for their efforts, and I do think that the community fund is a great way to start that engagement, right? Because we've been all about privacy. We can't be Ethereum, right? I don't think we should be. We are privacy tax specialists. We shouldn't be trying to like play around too much with too many other stuff. That's what it is. So this is how we can start, right? So yeah, Voss, maybe you have some ideas as well. I don't want to make this into like a FIRO thingy, but it's just like I've spoken to many other projects, even like CCX, Oxen, and a couple of others, and they have also had their own gripes with and challenges with miners as well, right? And I do feel that it's a big question of like how can GPU miners give back? How can GPU miners, give back to the projects that they mine from? And it's a bit hard to answer that. That's why I just said, like, look, I also don't really know exactly how you guys can contribute, but for the very start, at least try to shift your hash rate. Like, that's really like free and just like a couple of clicks, right? If you can't do that, then that's a clear signal for me that you guys aren't really supporting the project. Like, if you can't even do this very, very small thing, if I saw like a huge hash rate shift, decentralized, my mindset would be a lot different, because like, wow, okay, these people care, they are listening, right? So miners, if you're out there, it isn't too late. The poll hasn't completed, but the community really wants to see, not just me. Everyone's like, Reuben and the core team has been saying decentralize the hash rate, but they've done nothing. So why should we support you guys? But if you guys got together, decentralize, okay, regardless of what Two Miners does, it would be a very big show of support.
So what I would recommend is, I think you need to force them to make a move, even if they remake the same move. You deal with the laziness, the complacency, everything like that. I think you should force them to make a move with like a mandated client update. Obviously there's some risks associated with this, and obviously a ton of testing to make sure that there's not a potential exploit with a change like this. But and again, I'm not the most technical guy, so this is where you probably link up with Kristy, be like, how do you actually do this? I'm more of like, maybe I'll try to be the idea guy, right? But it's force them to make an update, force them to change their mining OS, right? A new client, tweak the algo, where your stuff's not gonna work. It's getting turned off, and it's not that you have to make such a substantial change. It's just literally a required update. A required update would force them to read, like, you could just have a one-page post on like the status quo of like, here's the situation, guys. This is basically where we're at. You need to update. We made this change. Also, if we don't distribute this hash rate, we will be moving away from proof of work. And if you have such an in your face, basically like, you have to read this, or we're gonna probably move away. And then they all go back to the same mining pool. I wouldn't feel bad about turning off proof of work, at least for a while. I mean, for a while it sounds wish-washy. There's a lot of different routes you can take with all of this, but
I mean, that's what we were hoping with FIRO PoW, right? Because I was like, oh yeah, maybe everyone's just entrenched with MTP, comfortable. Let's like do FIRO PoW and see how it goes.
I think maybe it's a little too passive. I think you're expecting people to be more informed than they are, and maybe even care a little bit more than they do, and maybe best proposed as the dramatic all or nothing. Like, we're not going to proceed with proof of work if we cannot decentralize our hash rate. This is a mandated update. This is your last call. We're going to reassess the network in 6 months, and if there's not a substantial change, we're going to make one. And I think you're in a difficult situation. I think your project has years, you have over half a decade under the belt. You need to force a move.
Vosk is right. I mean, look, as a project steward, as a core team, you are responsible
I
for the
step
network.
back, by the way. I'm technically not the project steward anymore.
Even though you're not, the core team is responsible for the network. It is not the community that the exchanges point fingers at. It's not the community that has the liability, right? It is all on the core team, and there are people far smarter than the three of us, like A16Z, that write about this. When you're trying to find your project's product market fit, you do not allow community governance. You build for product market fit first. You set out the vision, you define all of that, and then slowly you introduce community ownership. And then finally, once you've reached your inflection point and you've had your 1000x and the network's, got its huge user base, then you turn over the reins. Because a lot of projects make this mistake. They start out first being entirely community owned. They say that. And what ends up happening is you get really apathetic communities, really toxic communities, and the project eventually dies. The team has to build for product market fit first. Decentralization is the goal, it's the narrative, it's the end game, but there is a path to get there, and that path is 3 to 7 years. And I really think only Bitcoin's reached that path. Bitcoin and actually Monero has reached it. Yeah. So yes, I agree with Vosk. You need to basically update the client, put in the changes, tell your community what changes, and guess what? That is the governance. If they agree with it, they'll opt in and they'll download the client and they'll run it. And if they don't agree with it, they'll move their hash power off. It's simple. You don't need anything else. And you are still building for product market fit right now. You haven't gotten you haven't gotten the upturn that we see in disruptive innovation cycles. And so, yeah, right now, product market fit needs to be decentralized. Decisions on the network need to be centralized. So yeah, I fully agree. And I know it's a difficult thing to do. It's really difficult and you'll get a lot of hate for it. But at the end of the day, you know, if your community isn't happy with it, they'll move off the project or someone else will step up
as a
and take over the reins.
I think it's exciting, right? You know, let's make something happen. And who knows, it could lead to a lot of press, a lot of coverage, kind of, you know, some buzz, get people thinking about the project, talking about it. I definitely agree, you know, there's definitely going to be pushback. A lot of people are going to cry. You're going to get the toxic comments. But I think if you're concise in what you're doing and why, and illustrate the importance, and then, because personally, I think that, like, I feel like a negative energy has, like, been brewing in you on this for a while. And, like, the way you talk about it, I can tell you're frustrated. You obviously care about the project deeply. And I think you're a really good example of a long time, lead, team member of a proof of work project, and the struggles you face from the inside. And, you know, I mean, like, I've been basically, obviously, kind of more on, like, the outside, and Kristy is, you know, very unique and just kind of in everything. But in all seriousness, like, it saddens me to see you basically frustrated. And in a way, I think you're disappointed, and I would be too. And, you know, it's basically kind of gets to the point of, how can you save it? And you know, it just sounds a little bit, you know, maybe dramatic, but even just like, do you want to save it? Is it worth saving? Right? Because at the end of the day, if the value isn't there, the value isn't there. There's no reason to die on your sword if you want to continue with the project. And if that is moving to a different blockchain consensus mechanism, then, you know, so be it. Obviously, we're all, you know, heavy miners, or support mining. We hope that's not the case, but I'm not so, like, naive and selfish and can't look at, you know, problems and projects from different point of views, where I can't see outside of just a personal mining point of view of, you know, what really benefits the project the most. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. It's the project first, everything else follows. And if this isn't the best path for you, then it's not. You need to find the better route.
I mean, the way me stepping back, although it's just been like a couple of days since I'd done that, I wrote a forum post. It was surprisingly very emotional, you know. And for a lawyer, I mean, I am quite an emotional person, but, you know, I tried to repress that, but I couldn't repress that. It was, you know, even now, like, you can feel the emotion oozing out, right? But when stepping back, you know, and it's been actually pretty refreshing, you know, and there's this feeling of like, you know, the weight lifted off. I'm still doing the work in the background, but, like, I don't have to be, like, you know, embroiled in that toxicity, right? Like, you know, I've been, like, getting, you know, like, I used to kind of, like, scoff at celebrities, saying, like, oh, you know, they're so rich, but they get, like, a few like negative DMs and they all get depressed and whatnot. Well, guess what? Karma bit me. And, like, you know, when you get day after day, you get this, like, you know, toxic stuff, you're like, you questioning yourself, you know, you're like, yeah, maybe they're right, you know, maybe I am a piece of shit, you know, and yeah.
Honestly, yeah, it's sad to hear that. And, you know, I don't think you're a piece of shit, Reuben.
Me neither.
You know, unfortunately,
Yeah.
all three of us are public figures in a controversial space. And I think we've all gotten our, like, share piece of flax, you know, over the years. And it's frustrating. It sucks. It's like you said, you do, like, start to question yourself. Like, you know, like Kristy, you've worked on, you know, so many different implementations, and it's like funny you said like you're trying to, hey, like you're over here in one way trying to save GPU miners, and GPU miners are like death to Kristy, and you're like you idiots, you're killing your hero, you know. And then it's like, you know, like what do you think your best interest is, or your focus is? It's FIRO. Like you've been there for as long as I can know, right? You know, and you were here with the Z coin and then FIRO, and it's like, how can people not see that you clearly care? You could have left.
Yeah, and it's so funny now that when I announced it, the people are like, "No, listen to me." I'm like, you can't have me work for you and shit on me at the same time, right? Like it's like,
And you're right. It's frustrating. It's people who aren't basically end up as public figures one way or another, whether they wanted to be or not. They have no idea. Like, you know, I work all day on one specific video, and then we work on it in editing. We try to elevate. You know, we create this content, and then I bring it to the tube, and like within 3 seconds, some dude calls me a stupid idiot. I'm ugly, and my dog's fat. You know, I'm just like, what? You know, and I'm just like, you know, like one, she's not even fat. Okay, she's a healthy weight. Okay, if you got a problem, then it's with me. We need to address that. But you know, it's exhausting. You know, and it's stuff. It's like stuff comes out like left field. It seems like, you know, you just crypto is all. This is the other thing is that we have a international ecosystem, obviously. Every time zone's involved. So I like wake up and I'm getting like barraged with like negative messages. Like I open my phone and I like see like 7 things basically like, hey, yeah, like you suck, you're an idiot, you know, it's the worst thing I've ever watched. I wish I could have my 15 minutes back. My eyes are bleeding, you know. I'm just like GM fam, you know, it's good to see you. Um, and it's just, yeah, it's maybe one day it's you get mad, the next day you brush it off, the third day you're depressed, the, you know, year 3 you're just like, you start to just get like numb or like mean or bitter. You gotta like take breaks and take a step back and just kind of deal with it. But you really have to develop thick skin. It in a way, like if you view like becoming popular as a level of success, it brings a unique piece of misery with it. You know, it depends, you know, who you are and what you like and whatever else. Like personally, when I set out on with the channel and everything, I wanted to make content. I wanted to make cool stuff. I never really wanted the attention, but I knew that the attention would come if I became popular, which means that my videos and stuff were good. But like, I don't like enjoy it. I don't want people like clamoring over here and then hating me over here. It's just like, hey man, I made this video. Check it out. I hope you like it. Um, and I find the other stuff it's just draining. It's like the noise, and that's from like my point of view, especially like as a content creator. But you know, for you, like being involved with the project, like all that stuff drains your energy to work on the project today. Like if you wake up and everyone says you suck, guess what? You're not going to be motivated to work on FIRO today. And it's the same for you, Kristy. You know, I'm sure with everything else. It's like, hey guys, we made a big advancement with PoW, and they're like, PoW sucks, you idiot. And you're like, you know what? Just forget it. Just forget it. You know. I'm done.
Yeah, Kristy gave so much to PoW, and like, yeah, I saw like how it affected her, even like her self-esteem. I mean, like, you know, it was like really tough to see that, and I couldn't quite understand why she was facing this criticism. You know, it was like, wait, you know, isn't this good? You know, like this is so confusing, right?
We're on the same team, guys. Why are you stabbing me?
Even now in like Bitcoin 2022 with Miami, tons of toxicity, tons of people calling me like all sorts of names, shit talking me because I happen.
That's so sad.
It is sad, and you know why? It's because I dare to hold other coins and participate in other ecosystems, and my my advice is I was burned out. And then finally, I had some really great advice from my mentor who said that success doesn't come without haters. And that as long as people that you really respect and admire give you the time of day, and as long as they're friends with you, that's all that matters. You don't need to be popular. People who change the world aren't popular. people who do useful things for this space are popular. Like, there's plenty of people that absolutely hate Vitalik's guts. You see how much shit he gets online and on Twitter every single day. And at some point, you just have to be comfortable with the fact that those people are so angry that they can't be you, that all they can do is sit on Twitter and lash out and make mean comments on the internet. Where like, Vosk, you're out, you are a success in this space, you're a success story. And Reuben, being a core developer is hard, and you've earned the respect of plenty of people in the cryptography industry and in the cryptocurrency industry. Like, you each have your own successes. The people that are spewing hate, they're nobody. And that frustrates them. And that's why they lash out. And I finally came to that realization. I was like, okay.
The cool positive note to like, maybe wrap up, because it's like, wow, we've been like gone down that really like depressing moment, and now we're like, singing praises of each other.
GPU mining will make you sad.
Let me share something that I found particularly touching about GPU mining, and this is something that I still have that little flicker of hope for GPU mining. Like, obviously people don't really think so much about the Venezuela crisis now, but I remember during, like, when the whole Venezuela crisis was happening, there were a bunch of families that were messaging me. They were like, hey, I have like a small little rig of like, eight cards or so that's running in my house, and it's supporting my family. Thank you. And I was like, wow, that's powerful, right? Like, they had no access, like ASICs they couldn't bring in and all this other stuff. And I was like, yeah, this is the power of proof of work. And I especially as a privacy coin, other coins may not have this thing, but because like regulation, we are seen as the bogeyman and stuff like that. That's why I feel like proof of work in a way, especially for privacy coins, remain quite important. And that story, even though it's like just one probably out of many, but it was like personally it resonated with me, and like that should be how mining communities should be about, right? Like, yeah, maybe it's not a lot of money to us or whatnot, but somewhere else it's supporting an entire family and who are so yeah. I mean, I don't know what cool stories of GPU miners you guys have. I'm pretty sure you have some. Yeah,
that's a great point, and it kind of just speaks to that like peer-to-peer borderless digital currency and distributing those coins and making that a reality. Like, you kind of take that out of the original Bitcoin white paper. And that's the unfortunate part when Bitcoin moved away from multi-purpose hardware, that, you move kind of further and further away from that dream being realized in a way. And you deal with more and more centralized entities.
Now I'm getting negative again. We should be like,
oh, I did it. I did it again. Am I negative? It's the bear market. We're bear. I'm a bear now.
Fine.
Oh,
no. No, I'm joking.
Closing thoughts is, Reuben, if you need someone to come in and be an axe, call me, because you need to just do a client upgrade. Like, take our advice. Vosk knows what he's talking about. I know what I'm talking about. Just push out your client upgrade. Your community will be happier for it.
All right, and thank you so much, Voss, for hosting us, on rather short notice. And you've been a big supporter of our project, and really thankful for all the guides that you made and all the stuff, and really organizing all of this. And I hope this talk actually opens some people's eyes, right, as to like the state of GPU mining, and if it doesn't, it's not going to go to a nice place. But yeah.
that's a perfect little tack on at the end. I mean, I like that. But yeah, no, seriously, absolutely, it was a pleasure having you both on. And I mean, obviously it was short notice, but I was happy to make the time. I'd love to connect with you guys more. I feel like I've been just so face down and making content lately. I don't know. I don't talk to people enough really. I'm just like sitting here like, oh, let me research this stuff. All right, hey guys, here's a video, and you know, it's like rinse and repeat. It's been crazy because we've been trying to continue posting a video a day, and it's just it's a big endeavor.
New podcast idea, The Veterans. And just every week we get together and we just talk shit about the industry and talk about how miserable it is.
Let's vent it out.
Yes.
Vent it out. That's perfect. That's perfect bear market vibe.
It is. The Bear Warriors. There you go.
Ooh. We can have a fun icon for sure.
Yes.
For everyone watching the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and check all the links down in the video description below. We're going to cut up the content. I'll make some shorts and other things and different ways to distribute this because all of this whole interview, meeting, hangout, there's a ton of good info that, you know, I want to get out there and, you know, allow everyone to, as I always say, do your own research and come to your own conclusions. But hey, if you don't support proof of work, a spoiler, it's probably going away. So, you know, we all got to do our part.